here on the Colour of Country Life, speaking again with Stephen Reid from Michell Wool. How are you this week, Stephen?
Excellent, Rikki, and yourself?
Good, thank you. Looks like the markets are chugging along very nicely indeed when it comes to the wool sales.
Yeah, no, rock solid right across all types. Merinos, crossbreds, better style, some of the inferior re-offered wool, and even crossbreds and calvings went up. So the indicator went up actually 42 cents in Aussie dollars to close at 1,449. So very healthy market.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit like at the showgrounds. Every kid gets a prize this week at the wool markets.
Everyone's a winner, yes.
Yeah, and then what are some of the drivers behind this pricing? Why are things heading up this way? Is it on the supply side or demand side? Which ones are playing us some favours there?
Yeah, look, it's moderately complicated. It's Chinese New Year, so the biggest buyer of our wool, a bit over 80% are on holidays, but commercially they're still active. And the reason they're doing that is their raw material, particularly for early stage processing and spinning, is quite low. So that combined with delays in shipping and logistic issues, if they don't keep buying, their plants will stop. And they know, like our factory in China, once you stop, you lose a lot of your staff. It's very hard to get going again. So there's a demand pressure, which is probably from the middle of the supply chain. From a supply point of view, the delay in getting shearers and a lot of the wet weather has slowed the amount being offered. So this week there was about nearly 41,000 bales up. So you'd say supply is tight in terms of getting it to market, not necessarily on the back of the sheep, and demand from the middle of the supply chain is fairly tight. And of course Europe has exactly the same thing. What was 5 to 6 weeks into Europe now can quite often take 8 to 10. So the just-in-time buying's gone. If you look at the bigger picture, though, consumer demand at retail is showing positive signs with the rest of the world opening up and getting past dealing with COVID. That doesn't necessarily reflect in Australia, which is almost irrelevant from consumer demand for wool. We're that small. But in China in particular, they're still trying to have this zero COVID issue. And with all the travels in Chinese New Year, the reports we're seeing now is consumer demand for almost everything is down. So it's a complicated picture, and hopefully I've tried to make it a little bit simple for yourself and your listeners.
Yeah, well, I imagine, wouldn't one of the other driving factors be, I see from the World Health Organization, they think they might have plateaued with Omicron, for instance. People haven't been getting out much. They've been either staying at home or been locked down at home. People feel like maybe they're going to buy a bit more fashion. Instead of fashion in front of the fridge, they might get to visit some friends and wear some new clothing out for once.
Absolutely, and that's the really big picture, and that exists for pretty much all of the world apart from Australia and China. So China still is that lockdown, and we're still pretty much doing it here. Not, as I said before, we're relevant. So in terms of people filling up their wardrobes with some snappy clothing, which is where wool fits, we should see a pick-up there. We're coming out of winter. It's been an incredible winter in the Northern Hemisphere, so you'd like to think that will spur things along. And again, the supply chain, whether it's early stage processing, spinning, weaving, or even retailers, making daily phone calls to have people supply their knitwear or their woven fabrics, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Have some stuff sitting in the warehouse. So I think if you look at that supply-demand side, the demand side outweighs the supply issues. So we're in for a pretty fair time. Now,
sometimes when pricing is good, people jump into the market and think, let's get into that. Is that what's happening this week in the next week's auctions?
Well, hopefully next week. Next week's really a reasonable sale, 48,000 bales, and it's well up on what we've seen for the last 4 weeks, but 48 is not unusual for this time of year. So it will be a bit of a test of the market. The currency's up at 71.40. It did get below 70, so it's had a momentary correction, but against the euro with 62.40. So from a European perspective, I'd expect them to step in as well. And China needs the raw material, so I suspect they'll be fairly active. So I'd like to think we're going to see a solid market right across the board next week.
All right, we'll pick that up next Friday and see how it went. Stephen, thanks for your input. Much appreciated.
Absolute pleasure, and thanks for your interest in the wool.